Frankie, I don't like my Android.
I'm not talking to you.
It's really bad. It's so ugly.
I don't care.
I just can't take it. I wish it had an Apple logo. Shut up. Oh man, I miss my Apple Watch.
You are not my brother.
Boy, oh boy, does it suck being a green bubble.
I hate you.
Would it help at all if I narrowed it down to the top biggest issues with switching to Android?
No, it would not.
Okay, I'm gonna do it anyway. So, truth be told, the Pixel 6a has been impressing me in many ways, but that's not what this video is all about. I'll do a final review before I say goodbye later, but a lot of the channel members were hoping I could do a video on what the hardest parts about switching to Android really are. And I should preface from the beginning that this is not all to be blamed on Google. In fact, a lot of this video is mostly going to be me complaining about how difficult Apple makes it, of course, to leave the walled garden, which I haven't done in a long time, and now that I'm finally doing it again with my SIM moved over and everything, I can now speak from first-hand experience once again. Yeah, I understand why people don't want to switch out of their ecosystem, and they're willing to put up with a lot of Apple shenanigans because, for one, Apple makes it very hard and very annoying to leave, but also, Google doesn't make it too easy to stay once you have made the switch either. So, I wanted to get all of the obvious stuff out of the way real quickly, so there's the basic stuff like, oh no, you break your iMessage group chats. Everybody's stuck with green bubbles and SMS texts. Yeah, we all know that one. Same thing with the Apple Watch, but that's not really Google's fault that the Apple Watch doesn't work. And simultaneously, the Apple Watch is such a beautiful, like, Apple-designed product, both inside and out, that when I use my Apple Watch, I don't think I would want it to work with my Android phone. Like, the UI wouldn't be the same, and the apps would be so much different from what the apps look like on here. It's Apple's fault, but I don't really care anyway. I feel like even if I could pair my Apple Watch with my Pixel, I probably wouldn't, just because it wouldn't feel right. And yeah, you miss out on AirDrop and continuity camera in the universal clipboard. You know, there's all those Apple ecosystem benefits. But to keep today's video somewhat simple and short, I wanted to narrow it down to three main issues that make it really, really hard to leave Apple. And it's not just about working with other Apple devices, okay? My first one is actually referencing something that's just on the iPhone, that's not really on any other Apple product. It's not necessarily an ecosystem feature, but it's something that I think Google just doesn't really have a good replacement for, and that's the Wallet app. I think Apple has really doubled down on the financial side of the business, especially since they've started opening this whole Apple Card savings account feature thing, which I love because the interest rates are high, the UI is clean, and there's no fees, there's no minimums. Boy, I wish they had like a referral program for me to abuse how much I talk about it. But yeah, you technically can pay off your Apple Card on the web, but there's no information regarding the Apple savings account, and there's no like transaction history at all. Basically, the web version for the Apple Card just lets you pay it off, and there's really no other hardcore features. And not only, of course, do you miss out on that when you switch to Android, but there's not really a great alternative other than just keep your iPhone around, or I guess you gotta buy an iPad and access the wallet settings through the settings app. They don't even have a wallet app on the iPad, so that's not an ideal solution either. But I feel like there's workarounds for almost everything else. Like personally, I know a lot of you won't believe me, but when I switched to a green bubble, other than Randy complaining to me saying, hey, come back to the dark side, literally no one in my family or friend groups outside of the tech space complained. I'm in several group chats where they're exchanging photos and everyone's trying to keep in touch because we're all living on different parts of the country and stuff, and no one said a word. Maybe I just have a really great family that I'm proud to be a part of, but yeah, they didn't care. We switched to green, the pictures were a bit more compressed, but no one said anything like, hey, what went wrong? What happened? Everyone just kind of accepted it and moved on. And part of the help may be that for a lot of my family, we keep in touch on Messenger. I don't really like Messenger, but that's kind of the default messaging app here in the United States. If you're out of the United States, everyone's using WhatsApp anyway, and I've got that, so I can keep up with my international friends and family members that way. So I can work around iMessage, and I'll do another video explaining the workarounds I found for AirDrop and continuity camera and that kind of thing, and texting on your computer through your phone. There's workarounds. They're not ideal, but you can find a solution. But moving away from the wallet app from the iPhone, there's basically nothing you can do. I tried the Google Wallet app, but they won't let me add the Apple Card to it. They're like, sorry, this credit card doesn't work in this app. And yeah, you can't access your Apple Card savings account on the web. So if the goal of that credit card service was to tie in, your savings account and your social security and your credit score to your phone platform, then it's working, Apple. It really is working. And I'm sure I could download some third-party bank and open up another savings account here, but there's more third-party apps, there's more passwords, whereas the wallet app is always right there waiting for you. You don't have to log into it. You don't have to rely on some crappy third-party bank user interface and they're gonna ask you to change your password every time. No, it's just baked into your Apple ID, but I don't think Google has like a great replacement for that. There's not a Google credit card that has a super clean, easy to understand user interface that's baked in here, easy to apply for, and a high interest savings account. Like Pixel just doesn't really have a replacement for that. Maybe we need a Pixel credit card, Google. Get on that. The other one that is by far the most annoying, and this is kind of tied into the Apple ecosystem as well, but passwords, okay? We all have them for all of the different third-party services we use, and whenever you switch platforms, you start to realize how much you rely on iCloud Keychain to store all of your passwords so that when you log into a bunch of your apps, you don't have to really think, what's the password for this app? Oh yeah, I can just use Face ID or Touch ID, and it just logs me right in, I'm fine. But with this, you're like, oh crap, I need to go find all those passwords again and manually enter them and save them to your Gmail. So if you haven't used an Android before, this is probably going to be one of the most annoying processes of switching, unless you rely on a third-party password booking service, which brings us to today's video sponsor. No, we don't do that here. I had you go. Sorry, moving on. Yeah, I don't want to trust a third party to store all of my passwords because then they can get hacked and then they have access to all of my stuff. So no, honestly, I think you should either rely on Google saving your passwords because they own the platform of your phone, or you should let Apple store your passwords because you don't have to go through another third party and basically have a password for all of your passwords, which in my opinion is kind of hypocritical. But frankly, I think there's a lot of benefits to using an Android phone that I'm appreciating and I'll talk about later, and there's a lot of advantages to using an iPhone. And to most of you out there, unless you're just a diehard techie and you want to have both around at all times, I would say just stay where you are. I get comments on this channel all the time, Drew, you convinced me to switch to an iPhone. I never told you to switch. I'm always telling people, if you're on Android, stay there, like enjoy it, reap the benefits of it, and buy other Android phones so it's easy for you to switch over. But if you got an iPhone, also stay there, because the entire process of switching contacts and passwords and setting up accounts and finding all the different third-party apps and trying to replicate what you already had going for you over here, it is a nightmare. So I don't blame anybody for not wanting to switch platforms, even if there's disadvantages to either one. Android's got problems, iOS has got problems. I'm not here today to tell you one is better than the other. I'm just saying, stay where you are. Don't move around. It's frustrating and it's hard. Leave all of that hard work to us people in the tech community that are reviewing phones and talking about them. But my God, if I was not reviewing this phone for you guys today, I would never touch an Android phone with a 10-foot pole. Not because there's something wrong with it, just because I don't want to have to deal with the whole process of switching again. It's a nightmare. And lastly is something I'll admit is not necessarily anything wrong to do with Apple. It's not something that Apple could be doing better. This comes down to what Google has to offer over here on the Android side of things, and that's the user interface. And this could absolutely be a personal preference thing. I'm not trying to act like I'm unbiased and objective. I am super biased. Just look at the wall behind me. I am an Apple sheep. I'm not afraid to admit that. And there's something that is very difficult to articulate with the Android user interface. It's good. It's fine. It's impressive how much customization options there are. Basically more than you know what to do with, and yet they still make it pretty hard to find your battery health. You gotta download a third-party app for all that. But when it just comes to the overall navigation, I'm getting more specific here in reference to the animations. It's hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, other than just everything feels a little bit more clunky, I probably take it for granted on my iPhone and my iPad and my Apple Watch. Like, Apple puts a lot of work into making animations and the way you navigate between menus and apps smooth and elegant. And, everything functionally works on Android. You can still open the apps as you need them, arrange them as you want, but like something just feels a little bit less fluid. It doesn't feel as smooth, and it comes across, in my opinion, as just a little bit more jarring when the menus and animations are sliding a bit less natural. Like it doesn't feel like you're interacting with objects as you would in the real world, which is what I think iOS from the beginning, even in the Steve Jobs days, they were trying to emulate like things respond and things move the way they would in the real world, like having that rubber band effect when you reach the top of your timeline. You scroll down a little bit and it kind of moves, but then it goes back because there's nothing else to see. Whereas on Android, they tend to have more of this, just it stops when you reach the top of the page, and with Pixel, they tend to stretch out the timeline. Everything starts to squeeze or compress, and when you do the back animations, instead of having the menu item come up from the side, they add this little back button which does different things depending on what your last action was. And sure, I bet most of you Android people are probably used to this and comfortable with it, and you're thinking, what is Drew talking about? But truthfully, it's very hard to put my finger on exactly what it is, but it doesn't feel like at home to me. And maybe that's just because I've been using iPhones for so many years. Maybe I'd have to use an Android phone for 5 to 10 years for this to become more normal and natural, and then if I used an iPhone, it would feel out of place. But I've really tried in my head so many different ways to figure out how to articulate what it is about Android that just doesn't feel as responsive. Maybe it's third parties, you know, I use Twitter a lot, and Twitter is probably prioritizing how iOS works versus how Android works, and it makes it harder to switch between accounts because I can't just hold down the home button on Twitter. Or if, you know, I'm copying a link from Creator Studio, on iOS it captures the title and the link, whereas on Android it just captures the link, which means sharing these videos takes a few more steps on my Android. I still have the same thumbnail design app on my Pixel as I do on my iPhone, but all of the buttons and sliders just feel a little bit more clunky. They don't snap into place as much as they do on my iPhone. So it could be partly third-party app support not being as optimized, or not as much money being generated from the Google Play Store, so they kind of deprioritize it compared to iOS. I would love to hear your guys' perspective on this too, because it just, something feels like cheaper. And again, I'm coming from a 4.7-inch LCD iPhone with 60 hertz. I'm not coming from a 13 Pro Max with 120 hertz anymore. So I feel like it's not just a difference in value. It's not just because this phone is cheaper that the UI feels cheaper. Like hardware-wise, I would say this is pretty much superior to the iPhone SE2 in every way except the processor. But still, I find myself not loving the animations and the fluidity of the operating system. Everything just feels a bit more chunky and clunky, and less design symmetry, maybe, is what I'm looking for. Like font designs not being symmetrical, or the icons at the top getting more busy. I'm not sure what it is. It's just, Apple probably spends billions of dollars on having psychiatrists that try to figure out what the design language should be on the iPhone. And they're like, this icon makes me sad, and we need to update that. And I don't think Google dives into that whole psychology thing, because they probably don't think it's worth it. And they're probably right, because if they did blow the same kind of money on the whole like psychological effects of different app layouts and different animations, they'd probably come to the same conclusions that Apple's already at, and then everyone would just accuse them of copying Apple. So I think Google's still doing the right stuff ultimately, and I'm very curious to see how the Pixel ecosystem expands in the future, because I think Google is more positioned than anybody to threaten the Apple ecosystem, but at least today they can't rival it. All of the benefits of having an Apple enclosed loop, you know, that has so many devices compatible with each other and working together, and just having one password to manage everything. It's just so seamless, and it's just so simple. And that's truly what makes it difficult to leave the walled garden. It's not entirely just on Apple making it hard to leave, but yes, they definitely do. It's also Google doesn't give you great reasons to stick around. There's some pretty good hardware over there. You've got some magic eraser tools and some Android customization, but that stuff makes great demo, and then you kind of move on from it, and you kind of want to go back to the day-to-day features that are very simple, like iMessage or FaceTime or AirDrop. You know, technically they're not impressive, but they do just work, and they're very reliable, and that kind of keeps you coming back into the ecosystem. So don't worry, I'll do a whole positive video on the Pixel 6a later, but what are your guys' biggest issues with switching to Android? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Alp Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.